It's our stories. Welcome to a world where real stories sounds like a movie script.
I don't even know where to start. I'm sitting here, completely at a loss, staring at the ceiling and feeling like the ground has just disappeared beneath me. I don't know what to do. I keep replaying the signs in my head, the tiny things I ignored, the little alarms I should have listened to. But I didn't. I was blinded by love. I never imagined this could happen. Not with her. Not with my wife, my best friend for nearly 20 years. And yet, here I am, feeling like my entire world has collapsed. I work out of town most of the week, and I wasn't supposed to be home until tonight. We were supposed to leave for a 2-week road trip tomorrow. A trip that was meant to be just for us, a little escape after the chaos of family and friends all summer. But things at work were slow, so I decided to come home yesterday afternoon. As soon as I turned onto our street, I noticed a truck parked in my driveway that I didn't recognize. My neighbor had asked me recently how I liked the new truck, but I thought he was mistaken. I brushed it off. That should have been my first clue. As I got closer, a pit formed in my stomach. A terrible, sickening gut feeling that I couldn't shake. I loved my wife, trusted her completely, but there it was. That feeling. Strong. I crept around the side of the house toward our bedroom window. It was open, just slightly, enough for me to hear them. My chest tightened, my hands shook. I leaned in closer, my heart hammering like a drum in my chest. And there they were, naked on our bed. The reality hit me like a freight train. Every fiber of my being screamed in disbelief and horror. I walked away. I didn't do anything stupid. I couldn't. I had to escape. I went to my family's cabin for the night and drank. I drank until I couldn't think. And today, as I drove back to confront her, I pulled over halfway and realized I wasn't ready. My head was spinning with anger, betrayal, confusion. All I could think about was violence, about ripping the world apart just to feel something other than this crushing pain. But I didn't. I couldn't. I knew this was a critical moment, one that could dictate the rest of my life, and I had to be smart. So I reached out here to strangers. I'm not ready to speak to family or friends, but I needed to reach out, to vent, to find some clarity. The response has been overwhelming. Hundreds of messages, thousands of words of support and advice. And honestly, it moved me. It reminded me that there are good people in the world, even when it feels like everything around you is collapsing. The support also made me realize just how alone I had been. Over 600 unread messages, countless comments. I wanted to respond to everyone, to thank them individually, but I couldn't. So I'll just say here, thank you. Every message, every word, every gesture of care has meant more than you can imagine. I've been reflecting a lot over the past couple of days. My pain has lessened a little, though the hole in my chest still feels fresh, like I've been punched repeatedly in the gut. I've started thinking about the future. Not the fantasy future, but a practical one. We don't have kids yet, though we were planning to start soon. We sold our house, we were moving closer to my job in September. All of it was supposed to be a new chapter, a step forward. Now everything feels like rubble. I started noticing the signs I had overlooked. Texts late at night, which I rationalized as work or social obligations. Yoga classes she supposedly attended once a week, but apparently she wasn't even paying for them. Unknown callers hanging up whenever I answered the phone. Little inconsistencies I had brushed off because I trusted her blindly. And that trust, it's shattered now. My brother Matt has been a rock. I realized, painfully, that even when your world falls apart, some people are constants. He's been my true best friend, without judgment, without reservation. Talking to him helped me untangle some of the mess in my head. When I finally confronted my wife through text, I told her I needed to go to one of my company's remote sites and wouldn't be able to call her until the weekend was over. She offered to take her best friend with her on the romantic trip I had booked. A trip I knew wasn't meant for the friend, she claimed. I had already given the reservation to my brother and his wife, a subtle, quiet way of flipping the situation back into reality. I spent the weekend with Matt, fishing, exploring vineyards, clearing my head. For the first time in days, I felt a semblance of peace. But even then, my mind couldn't rest. Jen, Matt's wife, took it upon herself to do some digging and discovered what I feared most. My wife had been meeting the other guy at my place while I was out of town. She was lying to me even as she sent texts claiming love and longing. The betrayal was precise, calculated, and devastating. When I met with Sharon, a counselor recommended by Jen, I began to untangle my emotions. Talking to someone neutral, someone who could listen without judgment, was like exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Sharon's advice was clear. I need to confront my wife, get clarity, and stop letting this simmer in uncertainty. The longer I wait, the more poisonous the silence becomes. Returning home was surreal. I drove past her apartment, checked on her location, confirmed she was at the grocery store. Every action felt dirty, but I had lost all trust. When she returned, she approached me as usual, expecting comfort, love, a hug. I couldn't give her that. I asked for honesty. She fumbled, deflected, and finally admitted she hadn't gone to yoga. She had been out, drinking alone. This was only the tip of the iceberg. The confrontation escalated. Lies peeled away like layers of an onion. She confessed to an affair that had been going on for nearly a month with a married man, all while I was out of town working. The room seemed to shrink. The air thickened. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I had a panic attack. I washed my face in cold water, trying to regain composure. Even after this, the chaos didn't stop. Her attempts to manipulate, beg, and explain were endless. She tried to rationalize her actions, to plead for forgiveness, to promise everything from counseling to sexual favors. She even suggested quitting our jobs, moving overseas, starting a life anew somewhere we could forget everything. My emotions were a whirlwind. Anger, longing, disbelief, and heartbreak all collided inside me. Throughout it all, I've been trying to be rational. I've spoken with a lawyer, started preparing for divorce, ensured our finances are protected, and sought therapy consistently. Yet, the struggle between wanting to rebuild, wanting to run away with her, and wanting to stay strong in the face of betrayal is almost unbearable. Even now, after all the confessions, confrontations, and truths, I miss her. I miss the woman who was my best friend for decades. I mourn the dreams we shared, the plans we made, the future we envisioned together. The reality is harsh. She ruined what could have been, and I'm left with the debris of our life. And still, a part of me aches to restart, to forgive, to reclaim some semblance of happiness with her, even though she has shattered my trust. This is my story so far, a continuous thread of betrayal, grief, and painful clarity. I don't know where it ends. I don't know if I'll rebuild or walk away. I only know that every step, every decision, will shape the rest of my life. The days after the confrontation were the hardest. I woke up in an empty bed that suddenly felt like a mausoleum. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow on the wall, reminded me that my world had shifted irreversibly. I had always been someone who believed in solutions, in fixing what was broken, but some things aren't fixable. Some things shatter so completely that even the glue of forgiveness seems futile. I spent the first few mornings in silence, scrolling through messages from strangers who offered empathy, advice, and sometimes anger directed toward her. The words were a strange comfort. Even though they were strangers, they understood the raw, unfiltered pain I felt. One comment said, "Betrayal doesn't make you weak. It shows how deeply you can love." It struck me because I had loved her with everything I had, and yet that love had been weaponized against me, twisted into a trap I didn't see until it was too late. Matt and Jen became my anchors. Matt insisted we go hiking one afternoon to clear my mind, to escape the suffocating walls of my house. We climbed a trail that overlooked the valley below, the wind biting at my face, the sun warm on my back. He didn't say much, just let me talk when I needed to. I poured out the entire story, every detail, every lie, every betrayal. By the time we reached the summit, I was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but I felt lighter. For the first time in days, I felt like I'd taken a step toward reclaiming myself. Sharon, my counselor, emphasized the importance of boundaries. "You cannot heal if you continue to expose yourself to her manipulations," she said. It was a hard truth. I had hoped that after the confession, things might stabilize, that we could begin some kind of therapy or reconciliation. But the reality was far messier. Each time she texted, calling herself remorseful or lonely, I felt that old whirlpool of confusion and longing tug at me. I tried to set rules. No texting except for logistics. No unplanned visits. No private conversations without a witness. It felt cold and clinical, but it was necessary. I reminded myself that this wasn't cruelty. It was survival. I had to protect myself from being pulled back into a toxic spiral of manipulation and false promises. Then came the legal consultations. Divorce was on the table, and my lawyer was thorough, explaining every scenario, every risk. It was overwhelming. having to think about asset division, living arrangements, and even the small, intimate details of our life that she had violated. Yet there was a strange relief in seeing a path forward, even if it was painful. It was tangible. It wasn't just floating in a haze of betrayal anymore. It was concrete action, but life doesn't pause for pain. Friends and coworkers carried on as if nothing had happened. I attended meetings, responded to emails, and went through the motions of my job, but every interaction felt hollow. I realized that grief and betrayal are not public matters. The world expects you to move on while your heart remains a battlefield. One evening, I found myself sitting alone in our backyard. The stars were out, and the night was quiet, except for the rustling of leaves. I thought about her, how she used to laugh at nothing, how we shared quiet mornings with coffee and old music playing softly in the background. The memories were beautiful, unbearably so, and I hated them for making me ache. I realized that loving someone doesn't always protect you from pain. Sometimes it intensifies it. When I confronted her about the man again, she tried to explain, to soften the narrative, claiming it was just a mistake and a lapse in judgment. My voice shook with anger. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, repeatedly. The room fell silent after that. She had no response, and I didn't expect one. Sometimes the most brutal honesty is saying nothing at all. Family gatherings became complicated. My parents tried to stay neutral, my friends offered advice, and everyone had an opinion. But opinions are not truths. The truth was in the cold, silent nights, in the empty bed, in the documents I was preparing, in the counseling sessions that peeled back layers of shock, denial, and grief. I remember one particularly difficult night. I had a panic attack so severe that I could barely breathe. My chest constricted, my hands trembled uncontrollably, and tears streamed down my face. I called Matt, who arrived within minutes. He sat with me silently, held my hand, and waited until I could speak again. That night I understood that recovery wouldn't be linear. There would be nights like this, nights where the betrayal felt fresh and raw, nights where I questioned everything I had built my life upon. Amidst all this, I started journaling. Every thought, every memory, every pang of longing went onto the page. Writing became my lifeline, a way to externalize the chaos swirling in my mind. I noticed patterns, moments where I had ignored red flags, times when I had trusted blindly, emotions that I had buried for the sake of harmony. I began to understand myself better, not just as a victim of betrayal, but as someone capable of resilience. The weeks dragged on. There were texts from her, sometimes pleading, sometimes apologetic, sometimes silent, but I maintained the boundaries. Every time I felt tempted to respond emotionally, I reminded myself of the wreckage she left behind. And yet, human nature is strange. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I still longed for her presence, for the woman I thought I knew. That longing was dangerous. It reminded me why I had to stay vigilant, why love alone cannot erase betrayal. One afternoon, Matt suggested we take a short trip to the coast. The ocean, he said, has a way of putting life into perspective. We drove for hours, talking little, letting the waves crash against the rocks speak for us. Standing there, feeling the wind whip against my face, I felt a small flicker of hope. If nature could endure storms, so could I. If waves could crash and recede, leaving the shore intact, perhaps my heart could heal too. By the time we returned, I had made a decision. I would not allow the betrayal to define the rest of my life. I would grieve, I would confront, I would protect myself, but I would also rebuild. I started small, resuming my workout routine, calling friends I had neglected, engaging in hobbies I had abandoned. Each step was deliberate, each action a brick in reconstructing the foundation of my life. I didn't know if reconciliation was possible, or if it should ever be considered. Trust, once shattered, is not easily restored. And yet, in the depths of human complexity, I found room for forgiveness. Not for her, not yet, but for myself. Forgiveness was not a gift to her. It was a shield for me, a way to stop carrying the burden of anger that threatened to consume me. As the weeks turned into months, life began to settle into a new, strange rhythm. I still woke up sometimes with the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest, but it didn't paralyze me the way it once had. The documents for divorce were filed, the lawyer confirming each step, making sure my rights and future were secure. There was something oddly empowering in seeing the legal system acknowledge the wrongs committed against me. It was tangible proof that the world could recognize injustice, even if my heart was still raw. The divorce proceedings were a mix of administrative monotony and emotional turbulence. Sitting in the courtroom, listening to the formalities of property division, custody arrangements, and financial obligations, I realized how surreal it was to be disentangling years of shared life into numbered lists and legal jargon. Every item, every account, every piece of furniture, every shared memory felt like a tiny thread being cut from the tapestry of what we once were. I grieved for the life I'd imagined, the future that would never be. Yet, amidst the grief, I found clarity. Life could be reconstructed, even from broken pieces. Therapy sessions became more intense. Sharon guided me through exercises I had once dismissed as trivial, teaching me how to reframe my thoughts, confront my emotions without being swallowed by them, and reclaim the narrative of my life. We explored the layers of manipulation, the subtle ways trust had been eroded over time, and the profound impact that had on my sense of self. I discovered patterns in my own behavior, blind spots where I had ignored warning signs, tendencies to prioritize harmony over honesty, and moments when my love for her had become self-erasing. Acknowledging these truths was painful, but it was also liberating. I began to understand that healing wasn't just about escaping her influence. It was about reclaiming my own power and agency. Matt remained my constant anchor. His presence was a reminder that friendship could be unconditional, that support didn't demand anything in return. We started volunteering at a local community center, helping with after-school programs for children. At first, it was a distraction, a way to occupy the hours that once belonged to her, but soon it became meaningful. Seeing the smiles on the children's faces, hearing their laughter, and witnessing their curiosity reminded me that life was bigger than personal pain. It reminded me that there was beauty and joy waiting outside the shadows of betrayal. One evening, I received a text from her. It was brief, almost clinical. "Can we talk?" I stared at my phone, the screen glowing like a warning sign. For a fleeting moment, the old longing resurfaced, but I quickly reminded myself of the wreckage she left behind. I drafted a reply in my mind, only to delete it. The conversation would not happen. Not yet, and perhaps not ever. My boundaries had become my shield, and I wasn't about to lower them for the sake of nostalgia. Life, as it does, forced me to confront unexpected challenges. Work demanded more hours, a project that required meticulous attention and creativity. Instead of sinking under the pressure, I channeled my energy into the task. The meticulous organization, the planning, the late nights of research, it all became a form of therapy. I was rebuilding my life piece by piece, not in grand gestures, but in small, deliberate actions. Each email sent, each meeting attended, each milestone achieved was a quiet victory over the chaos that had once consumed me. As winter approached, I found myself drawn to reflection. Snow blanketed the streets, muffling the world in silence, and I wandered through the city in contemplation. Memories of her, both tender and painful, surfaced with startling clarity. I realized that holding on to anger would not serve me. It would only prolong my suffering. Forgiveness, I understood, was not about excusing her actions, but about freeing myself from the prison of resentment. I began writing letters I would never send, articulating my pain, my disappointment, and my hopes for a future unburdened by her choices. One night, while reviewing the letters, I realized something profound. The act of writing had transformed my grief into insight. I could see patterns, understand motives, and most importantly, recognize my own strength. The betrayal that once seemed like an unscalable wall now felt like a catalyst, forcing me to confront my vulnerabilities, to learn resilience, and to reclaim my identity. Gradually, I allowed myself to dream again. Not about her, but about life beyond the shadow of betrayal. I planned trips, pursued hobbies I had neglected, and reconnected with old friends. Each step forward was a declaration. My life would not be defined by her actions, but by my choices, my resilience, and my capacity to love. Not blindly, but wisely. The final meeting with her was anticlimactic, yet profoundly symbolic. We met in a neutral setting, surrounded by the muted hum of a cafe. There was no drama, no tears, no pleading, just two people who once shared a life, now separated by choices and consequences. I spoke calmly, asserting my boundaries and acknowledging the past without being consumed by it. She listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally silent, but the power she once held over me had dissipated. I left that meeting lighter, unshackled, and, for the first time in months, truly free. Months later, I returned to the backyard where I had first confronted the void of her betrayal. The stars were out, and the wind carried the scent of pine and earth. I stood there, reflecting on the journey, the grief, the anger, the the sleepless nights, and the slow, deliberate reclamation of self. I realized that I had survived not despite the pain, but because of it. Pain had been a teacher, betrayal a harsh mentor, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the life I wanted to lead. Love, I understood now, is not about possession or blind devotion. It is about respect, trust, and the courage to stand alone when necessary. Betrayal may scar, but it does not define. And as I looked up at the endless sky, I felt a quiet resolve to live fully, love wisely, and embrace each day with the knowledge that I had endured. And in enduring, I had become unstoppable. Life continued to move forward, but unlike before, it was now deliberate, conscious, and filled with a cautious optimism. The first few months after the divorce were the hardest. There were nights when the apartment felt impossibly empty, the echoes of shared laughter now replaced by silence. I would sit by the window, staring at the city lights, trying to reconcile the life I had lived with the life I was now building. It was in those moments of quiet that I began to truly understand the fragility of human trust and the resilience required to rebuild it. Therapy became a sanctuary. Sharon guided me through exercises that were at times uncomfortable but ultimately liberating. We explored the nuances of emotional manipulation, the subtle ways in which my sense of reality had been undermined, the quiet erosion of my self-confidence. I learned to recognize the psychological patterns that had made me susceptible to her actions, and in doing so, I began to reclaim the autonomy that had been stolen. Each session peeled back layers of denial, shame, and confusion, revealing the core of who I truly was. During this time, my relationship with Matt deepened. He became not only a friend, but a confidant, a witness to my healing process. We spent long afternoons discussing books, philosophy, and life's unpredictable turns. Sometimes we would sit in silence, simply sharing the comfort of presence. His unwavering support reminded me that not all connections are tainted by betrayal, that genuine human bonds still existed in the world. Volunteering together at the community center became more than just a distraction. It became a purposeful act of creating joy and stability for others, and in turn for myself, work offered both challenge and distraction. I immersed myself in a complex project that required meticulous attention, late nights, and innovative thinking. I discovered an unexpected satisfaction in productivity and the tangible results of effort and creativity. Each completed task became a testament to my ability to focus, to persevere, and to reclaim the part of myself that had been lost in emotional turmoil. The discipline of work, coupled with therapy and support from friends, created a structure that slowly replaced the chaos that had once defined my life. Memories of her surfaced unpredictably, triggered by songs, scents, or even the smallest gestures in daily life. There were moments of longing, moments of anger, and moments of grief. Instead of suppressing these feelings, I learned to observe them, to allow them to pass without letting them dictate my actions. Writing letters I would never send became a powerful exercise. Each word a release, each paragraph a step toward closure. In these letters, I confronted the raw truths of our shared past, articulated my pain, and gradually began to imagine a future unburdened by resentment. The first snowfall of the season brought with it an unexpected serenity. I walked through the quiet streets, snowflakes settling gently on my coat, the city muffled in white. There was a sense of renewal in the air, a tangible reminder that life could continue, that beauty could persist even after devastation. I allowed myself to dream again, not of a life with her, but of a life filled with authenticity, connection, and purpose. I envisioned travels I had postponed, hobbies I had abandoned, and friendships I had neglected. Each vision became a goal, each goal a beacon guiding me forward. The final meeting with her was less dramatic than I had anticipated. We met in a neutral cafe, surrounded by the quiet hum of conversation. There was no anger, no pleading, only acknowledgement. I expressed my boundaries calmly, articulated the lessons I had learned, and made it clear that my life was moving forward. She listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally silent. The power she once held over me had evaporated, replaced by a mutual recognition that our paths had irrevocably diverged. Leaving that meeting, I felt lighter, unburdened, and for the first time in months, truly free. In the months that followed, life took on a new rhythm. I pursued hobbies with renewed vigor. Painting, hiking, and photography became avenues for expression and discovery. Each activity reminded me that joy could be cultivated, that creativity and passion were not dependent on anyone else's presence. I reconnected with friends I had drifted from, forging relationships based on mutual respect and shared experience. These bonds were different, deeper, more resilient, and rooted in authenticity rather than obligation. Winter turned to spring, and with the changing season came reflection. I revisited places that had once been shared with her. The cafe where we had first met, the park where we had spent lazy afternoons, the streets we had wandered aimlessly. These locations no longer carried the weight of memory. Instead, they became markers of survival, of lessons learned, of strength regained. I realized that every scar, every painful memory, had contributed to the person I was becoming. I was no longer defined by betrayal, but by resilience, wisdom, and the courage to continue. Love, I learned, was not about possession or blind devotion. It was about respect, trust, and the courage to maintain integrity in the face of adversity. Betrayal may scar, but it does not define. As I stood beneath the stars in my backyard, the wind carrying the scent of pine and earth, I felt a profound sense of completion. I had endured, I had grown, and I had emerged stronger. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I welcomed it with open arms, confident in my ability to navigate its challenges and embrace its joys. The journey was far from over. Life continued to present obstacles, moments of doubt, and unexpected challenges. Yet, each trial became an opportunity to apply the lessons learned, to reinforce the strength gained, and to deepen my understanding of myself. I approached new relationships, both platonic and romantic, with a measured openness, aware of the risks, but willing to engage with honesty, vulnerability, and discernment. As the years passed, I looked back on that period not with bitterness, but with gratitude. It had been the crucible in which my character was tested, refined, and ultimately strengthened. The pain of betrayal had taught me empathy, resilience, and the importance of self-respect. The solitude had cultivated reflection, creativity, and independence. And the friendships that had endured had reminded me that true connection is not contingent upon perfection, but upon authenticity, support, and shared humanity. Eventually, I reached a point where her presence in my life was no longer a source of emotional turbulence. She became a distant memory, a chapter in the story of my life that had contributed to the person I had become. I embraced the fullness of my experiences, the pain, the joy, the growth, with a sense of completeness. I had transformed betrayal into wisdom, grief into insight, and loss into empowerment. Standing beneath the endless sky, I felt the vastness of possibility stretching before me. Life was no longer defined by fear, regret, or longing. It was defined by courage, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of authenticity. The scars remained as reminders of the journey, but they no longer dictated the terms of my existence. I had endured, I had reclaimed my power, and I had emerged ready to embrace the world on my own terms, unshackled, whole, and fully alive. Thank you for staying with me until the end. How would you have acted in the protagonist's place? Write your thoughts in the comments. More fresh and controversial stories every day on my profile. Like and subscribe to this channel.